Hello, thanks again for joining. My name is Emily, and we're reading The Marrow Thieves by Sherry Dimmoline. This week we're on to chapter 7, which is another coming to story. So at the beginning of the book, we heard about Frenchie's coming to story. This time we get to hear about Wab's coming to story. And as we're reading, I want you to think about what a coming to story really means and why certain information would be given by that character. In the last chapter, we saw Miig saying how everyone has their own origin story and it's up to that person to tell the story and nobody else. And so that makes us think about, well, what information is this person choosing to share and why would they share that? Why is it relevant? So just have that thought in the back of your mind as we read. And if you do have the book and following along, it's page 80 and it looks like this. So let's get started. So Wab's coming to story. Before they emptied out, the inner cities were swarming with desperation-hungry bellies, pinched guts, lousy scalps, dirty necks, and the people who made money off of it all. The alleys grew lean-tos and shelters made of layers of melting cardboard like hives. The apartments were stuffed to overflowing and people huddled in the hallways. They made their homes in the stairwells after every room was taken, so that once the elevators were shut off, you had to bribe your way through living rooms and sleeping babies to get to and from your apartment. I lived on the top floor with my mother. She drank. Men came. Men left. One day my older brother, Niven, stopped coming home, and it was just the two of us. The two of us and the revolving parade of men with dirt-stiff jeans and bloodied knuckles. Sometimes they came after me, waking me up from my sleep when they tried to jam their rough hands in my pajamas. Sometimes they got more than just a feel before I could fend them off and lock myself in the bathroom. I hated it there. There were more bugs than food in the kitchen, and when they shut off the water first and then the power next, it stunk and the rats came, braver than the bugs, more invasive than the men. Eventually, after the raids started, someone set fire to the building, trying to cook spam over a hall fire, and me and my mom were on the street. I was 10 then, and I watched the military shuttling the cleaner citizens to new settlements and gated communities. We hid in a dumpster we shared with a mute named Freddie when the school staff came for the Indians. Freddie was Malaysian, but he wasn't taking any chances. Freddie's wife had been carried away at the food bank, and she was from Taiwan, but no one believed her. There was good money in snitching on Indians, and people would call in if a Swedish girl wore a braid in her hair. That's why we stopped going to the food banks. The volunteers called in Indian sightings, and next thing you knew, a wave of white vans screeching up and off you went, kicking and screaming, watching yourself in the mirrored reflection of their sunglasses, throwing boxes of macaroni and cheese and screaming to some god or devil or anything in between. We'd heard too many stories about the death camps, the way we were being murdered real slow. One time we were half a block away when they showed up. We watched them carry off an old man and his grandson before we remembered to run. I'll never forget that way that man looked when they tossed his grandson in the back of the van like a bag of rice. I watched his soul fold up on itself like a closing door. The light and warmth and humanity clapped shut in his eyes because he couldn't protect the one thing that mattered. There was no coming back from that, even if he did manage to walk away later on, which he wouldn't. My mom traded favors for booze since food wasn't really her priority. She might have already known she was dying by then. Anyway, I wonder if you can feel poison in your blood, if your veins feel tighter or your pulse gets thicker somehow. Anyway, I was left to feed myself. I was a runner and I could go for hours without having to stop or even slow down. The way a good sprint turns your breath to a low whistle, the way it spring loads your knees, that was my drink. I was addicted. At first, I'd run for the joy of it, but once we ran out of food, I did it in trade. You needed a message brought to your brother on the west side of the city after phone service was cut? I was your messenger. You needed medicine and weren't well enough to get to the pharmacist? I was your girl. But it wasn't free. You had to put gas in the car if you wanted it to drive. I charged a tin of soup for a short jaunt, a full loaf of bread, and a jar of pasta sauce for a trip any longer than the immediate neighborhood. And business was good. After the phones were cut, cell service was blocked in an effort to persuade the leftovers to either move into the new developments or to fuck off and die. It also made it easier to isolate the indigenous stunt the growth of community. I was in demand, and for something other than what was under my PJs. I ran for a whole year before they caught me. Not the government assholes, just regular assholes, everyday assholes. The kind of assholes that move around in packs because they're too weak to be alone. They caught me on a bogus run they'd put in, sending a stupid hillbilly-looking Indian hopped up on opiates to commission a run. I'd seen him around enough to nod when he passed me. Sometimes he was with my mother, and I recognized his state well enough not to slow down. Today, though, he came in with a job. Easy money, he said, drooling onto the back of his hand. Nothing serious, he lied, handing over danishes in advance as payment. I should have known right then. I was to deliver a sealed envelope to the west side by sundown. I ate 2 of the danishes right off. They were good, not even 2 days stale. I put the remainder in my backpack. I should have eaten them all then and there. I should have never taken them to begin with. I set off full speed, sucking sugar out of my molars and just real pleased with myself. I ran down the tracks left in the potholed road from the old streetcar line. When I got to the building in the west, there were 2 guys standing guard out front. They had baseball bats, real ones, not the whittled 2x4s most people carried, and wore sunglasses. I should have never shown them the envelope. I should have thought better about following them inside the double front doors of the old deli when they started laughing. Inside, it was cold and mostly empty. There was another guy behind the old counter, wiping down the steel surfaces in the front kitchen and serving area. In the main room were a couple of round tables with broken chairs. There was another group of men there, quiet now as I walked past with my letter held in front of my chest, like it would keep me safe. I followed the guard into the back, all eyes on me, where I found a man with red kinky hair and a wide nose sitting at a low desk. "So," he said as he stood up. "You're the runner, yeah?" I tried to stay hard. "Boy, you're a master of observation." He threw his head back and laughed. His front teeth had been sharpened to points by bone or grinding or evolution. I couldn't be sure. My legs started to shake. He stood and walked around the desk, sitting on the edge of it directly in front of me, arms across his thick chest. "She's feisty," he remarked to the guard on my left. "I like that." They chuckled together. "Here's your letter, paid in full. I'll be going now." I extended the letter to him, pushing it against his nylon tracksuit jacket. Wait now, runner. Don't you want to see what's inside?" "None of my business." I shrugged, still holding out the envelope he wasn't taking. "Oh, you'll want to stay for this." He finally grabbed it, running a long, smooth finger along my hand when he did. The guards moved in tight on either side of me as the redhead took the envelope back to the desk and sat in his taped-up leather chair. He tapped it on his forehead. "You see, runner, I have a new business venture I've been trying to get off the ground. I have this idea that we can provide services where the fair city of Toronto has decided to rescind theirs." He pointed with the envelope to the guards on either side of me and to the door. I turned to see the men from the front room gathered there, watching, waiting. The danishes in my stomach turned to gas and burn. But he tore open the end of the envelope and blew inside. "Seems like someone already beat us to it. Nobody wants to pay the prices we've set for our communications excellence on account of some squaw bitch who'll do it for a tin of food." He turned the envelope upside down and shook it. Nothing came out. Decoy. Oh no. I turned, tried to run, adrenaline kicking into my joints like electricity. The guards looped their big arms in mine and lifted me clean off the ground. The redhead laughed, and the group at the door, they joined in now, making their way into the room, eyes flashing. I kicked and swore and swung my trapped limbs so hard my braid wiped at my own eyes. So I closed them. I didn't see when they carried me to the broken freezer, when they locked me in and lined outside. I only saw for 1 minute when the redhead made his way in first, unzipping his jacket and untying his pants. Look at me. I opened my eyes. I stood there in the freezer light, brown chest bare, a silver knife in his hand. You're going to stop your little business, yeah? I nodded, quick, all my bravado gone, breathing so hard my nose burnt. I'm going to make sure of it. He moved fast, too quickly for me to do anything but close my eyes again. I didn't feel the slice, just the wet on my cheek and neck and chest. Then he was pulling off my pants. Then I stopped feeling altogether. Later, I heard I was there for 2 days. 2 days in that freezer with the lineup replenishing itself every time it ended. And when they let me go, I limped out, holding my stomach, my eye already shriveled. I limped home to my dumpster, to my mother, to Freddie, the Malaysian. There were no more running. Instead, I hid. Freddie tried to clean me up and stitch my face, but it was already scarring. I didn't care. Neither did my mum. She'd started smoking crack, which was plentiful, to replace the booze, which was scarce. She barely moved out of the way of her own piss if she wasn't on the hunt for the next rock. When I could walk, I did. 1 block, then another, then a field, past a line of trees, and into the bush. Gone. And the guy who set up the run, who handed over the danishes and scurried off into the alleyways, that was the man I saw a week ago in the woods. I'm sure of it. Is he coming to take Wab back to the bad guys? I jumped at the small voice behind me, pitched high with terror. Riri had crept into the room. Did those bad guys work with the murderers? And why did they murder us so slow? She was on the verge of hysterics, trying to hold it back in the way she did when really scared. How long had she been there? What did she hear? And how could I take it back? Oh God, no! Wab was mortified, holding her hand over her mouth. She slumped down on the couch, shaking her head, eyes closed now. Miig sighed and motioned Riri forward. Come, daughter. Time to hear story. Okay, so we'll end there today. That's Wab's coming to story. Make sure to check out the guided reading questions that go along with it. And again, thinking back to what is a coming to story, what is included in an origin story, and why do those parts, why would they be important to that character's sense of self? All right, thanks again for joining, and we'll see you again next week on Wednesday for more of the Marrow Thieves. Thank you.